What's going on, guys? Geoff here from the Hookup Tackle. Today I wanted to talk about some 3 underrated swim baits that some of you guys may not know of or have never even fished before or seen. So today I kind of wanted to talk about them just because swim bait fishing has become super big in like the past couple of years, and everybody obviously knows the big name brands. So today I'm going to show you guys some secrets that pros don't want you to know. So let's get right into the video. Secrets. Okay, so as you guys all know, that swim bait fishing has become super popular in the past couple of years. And when it comes down to fishing these swim baits, a lot of guys, they're just throwing the staples of the swim bait world like depths, Huddleston, DRT, baits like that everybody knows about, everybody's buying up. And there's a lot of baits out there in the swim bait world that a lot of guys don't know about and they don't fish. And a lot of these baits, the reason why they may not be fished is because they're not hyped enough, or people just don't really care for them because they're not, oh, it's a cheap bait, so it's not going to work. So there are some amazing baits out there that are definitely a lot more affordable than some of the big name brands that catch just as many, if not more fish. So let's get right into it. Now, the very first bait that I'm going to talk about is a great bait if there's a lot of guys that are fishing local urban spots, and that is the Mike Bucca, the baby Bull Shad. The baby Bull Shad, I've been fishing for probably the past year and a half or so at some of these local urban spots, and ever since I got my hands on this bait, I've been catching fish consistently at these urban spots. It's a relatively small bait, as you guys can see. It's 3 3/4 inches long, only weighs 0.5 of an ounce. So it's a super small, super lightweight bait. But if you guys do know about the Bull Shad, which is a very popular bait, this is pretty much a scaled down version that is more of an ABS plastic than it is just a regular resin style. So the bait, it's a lot easier to make, cheaper than some of the resin baits, and it still flat out gets bit. I mean, at a lot of these urban spots, the shad that are in these spots, at least here in Arizona, they don't get more than 4 inches, maybe 5 inches, but it's really rare. So a lot of those shad, they're anywhere from 2 to 4 inches long. So a bait like this will definitely match the hatch a lot better than if you're gonna throw like a Depths 250 or a Clash 9, right? So when you downsize, yeah, you're not going after that big trophy bass on a big swim bait, but you're gonna get a lot of bites. Even a bait of this size, I've caught fish up to 4 pounds out of some of these urban spots, which is pretty good considering a lot of these urban spots, they're really pressured. They're so used to seeing just the normal, everyday, conventional type of stuff. So when you throw a bait like this in there, they're gonna go absolutely crazy for it. Now, the rod that I would fish with a bait that small is something like a 7-foot rod. This is a Megabass Magdraft rod. It's a fantastic rod. I've been fishing it lately for the buzz bait, shallow diving crankbait. It's got a very soft tip, but it has a really good load further down the rod, where if you are fishing something that's a trebled hook bait like the baby Bull Shad, you're going to be able to set the hook, but it's not too stiff to where you're ripping the trebles out of the fish's mouth. So, but really any 7-foot rod, medium to a medium heavy rod is going to be just fine. The reel doesn't really matter. Either it's a 6-4 to 1 or like a 7 to 1 gear ratio. You want to fish it on pretty light line. I either go with a 10 or a 12-pound fluorocarbon. This is just FC Sniper. That fluorocarbon, with this particular bait, it likes to rise up. So if you cast it out there, since it's so light, you can let it sink, and it sinks like a moderate to slow sink. It'll come down, but really likes to ride up. So that fluorocarbon is going to help keep that bait further down in that strike zone, especially if you do want to sink out the bait a little bit further down. So definitely recommend fluorocarbon over copoly or mono with this bait. And overall, it's a very inexpensive bait. Ben, how much are you guys selling these things for?
Geoff.
Okay, I'll show the price right there. Very inexpensive bait, and it gets absolutely crushed. Okay, so the next bait we're going to talk about is actually a big bait. Now, how we just talked about a very small little swim bait, we're pretty much just going to quadruple that and talk about the 10-inch money Magdraft is what I like to call it. The Magdraft has been an awesome bait for me for the past 4 years. It's been an absolute killer. I've caught a lot of big fish. My personal best is on the bait. My buddies is also on the same exact bait that I was fishing. The Magdraft is one of the most underrated soft baits, I think, on the market, just because there's so many different ways that you can fish the bait. You can fish it weedless, you can fish it on the bottom, you can fish it up top in the water column, and a lot of guys I know really aren't fishing it because they'd rather fish, I don't know, like a Huddleston or a Batesmith, where this bait has that same size and profile as some of those bigger soft baits, but it's a lot cheaper, a lot easier to actually get, and I just really like the way that this bait swims. It swims completely different than how a Huddleston or a Batesmith would swim on the bottom. Now, the Magdraft, it's made to fish like this. It's got this really wobbly while the tail goes crazy in the back. And I think that kind of action, if you put it in the right spots where all the guys are fishing a Huddleston, where the Huddleston, it's got a little bit of head, and the tail's kicking in the back. The Batesmith, it's got a little head, a little bit of tail. It's very subtle, while this has a combination of a body roll and the tail kicking side to side. So that extra movement that I think is what really triggers a lot more bites than I will get on like a Huddleston or a Magnum. Now, there's tons of other sizes of this bait. There's a 5, 6, 8, and then the 10. I've always just gravitated more towards the 10-inch. Now, it's a big bait, I can't really lie, but when you start fishing it, when you start...
Big baits and I cannot lie.
He can't lie. When you're fishing a bait like this, after a while, eventually you'll start to notice that, well, it's actually not as big as I first thought. I mean, I talked to some dudes in shop where they're like, yo, like the Magdraft, it's really cool, but that 10-inch, it looks so big in the packaging. And at first, I thought the exact same. It looks really big, but once you start getting it in hand and playing with it, you start to realize that it's actually not that large. I mean, I've caught in 3-pounders on this bait before. And what's really cool is about this bait is it's very, very soft. So it can fold on itself with very ease. So it folds up nicely. So we were catching really big fish on this bait. We were fishing it around docks. We were fishing it down deep along rocks. Like, so many different ways we were fishing this bait, and it was absolutely getting crushed. Fish from 2 pounds all the way up to almost 10 pounds. So it's a super underrated bait. Now, if you guys have noticed, on this specific one, this is one that I fished, it's got a completely different rigging style on it. It's got a 80-pound braid leader down here from the hook point, where if you can see on this one, it comes with a swivel to a hook, and it's got like a magnet up here on the top. And what that does is you pretty much stick one of the points into the bait. It's supposed to stick there and stay there. But when I first started fishing this bait, I had a couple bites and they didn't connect because I was seeing that they were coming up from underneath and hitting it like right here in the middle of the bait instead of further up here and gobbling the whole thing. So after seeing that, I was like, okay, let's cut off that harness system right here, right? And let's rig like a stinger that you would on like a Magnum or like a 10-inch Huddleston, but let's do it on the bottom instead, because I still wanted to fish it high in the water column at the time. So those fish would come up, and this is just a size 1 decoy quad. Paper clip holds it down, and that's it. It doesn't come off, doesn't come loose until you hook a fish, and then it comes out and rips out. And that way I have probably missed maybe 4 or 5 bites out of the 40 plus that I've gotten on this bait. So I like this rigging a lot, and when you use a hook of this size, this small, you can see that it rides the bait really well. You can't really even see it on the top. It's a very small hook, but once you have a hook like that, what this bait will do is when you're coming up to a piece of cover, it'll ride it and then push the hook away, right? So when the hook is this small up against the body, it won't hook the actual piece of cover. So it's not completely snagless, but it does fairly well around grass, trees, and rocks, and I'm able to get that bait through that cover to get those bites. Now, for the rod that I'd fished the Magdraft on, pretty much just any 8-foot extra heavy rod. It's got to have a little bit of tip so I can really load the rod. This is just the Megabass Onager. It's a 7-11 4 to 8 ounce rated rod. Again, it's got a fairly light tip, but it's got good backbone, so when you are fishing deep or you really want to jack that fish, you can really do it on a rod like this. The reel that I'm fishing with it is normally a round reel that's like a 5 to 1 gear ratio. The fastest reel that I fished on it was like a 6-4 to 1. It does just fine, but that bait, it's made to be fished very slow. So if you work it too fast, it's gonna blow out. So you can fish it slow, it's gonna track. Once you get one that swims really good, you'll understand the speed. You're gonna get absolutely crushed on it, I'm telling you right now. So something a little bit slower is going to help you. So like a Calcutta is going to be fine. Cardiff, I used to fish it on. Anything that's a little bit slower, you're going to do just fine on. Now, the line that I'm normally fishing with the Magdraft is anywhere from 20-pound fluorocarbon or 25-pound. Either one does just fine with the bait. A lot of guys are probably going to be more comfortable fishing it on the heavier line, but either line's going to do just fine. That is the awesome 10-inch Money Magdraft. Okay, the last bait that we're going to talk about is one that I've actually really picked up just recently, and I've actually had some pretty decent success on it, and that is the Gan Craft, the jointed claw, the 178 size. Now, this bait, I've been saying it for quite a long time that it's a pretty underrated bait because I know a lot of guys like to fish it and they catch a lot of fish on it. I just recently literally picked it up, and first trip out with it, I caught a couple fish on it. So right out the gate, I'm just like, oh wow, it actually does catch fish. And now they make quite a few other different sizes. They got obviously the tiny little 70 size all the way up to the 230 size. The 178, it's like 7 inches long. I think this is such a perfect size bait just to get bit really anywhere. I mean, it's not too big for even like your urban spots, but it's not too small if you want to go out and chase, you know, those bigger fish on a big body of water. So this bait, I like to have it in the floating version. So they have a slow sink and they have a floating version. The floating version, just because you have a floating version doesn't mean that the bait's going to stay high up in the water column. Now, what that means is that, yes, it's going to float, but what's cool is about this bait and the way that it's designed is it's a very S-style motion, right? But if you really work it harder, it'll get down to 3 or 4 feet, and that's where you're really in the strike zone. What's cool is that since it's a floater, you don't really have to worry about casting it off. It's cool because if you're coming up to a piece of cover and you feel like you're gonna hang up on it, you can literally just stop reeling, the bait's gonna come float over that cover, and then you can keep working it. So I really like the floating version overall, because even if you have the floating version and you want it to get down deeper and you want to make it into like a suspend or like a slow sink, you can literally just pick up Zappu. These are just the board weights, 2 grams. You can literally just throw them underneath the chin of the bait, and that's gonna help it stay down. So if you guys really want just one bait, how I've said in a glide bait, I'd always get like a floating, because you can always just pick up weights like this, put them on there, and you can have 3 different glide baits. You can have a floater, you can have a slow sink, and a fast sink, just using those weights alone. Instead of having to buy 3 different glide baits, you can literally just buy the floating version. Now, the rod that I would recommend for like the 178 is you're gonna want like a medium heavy to heavy style swim bait rod. This is the Tequila Baccarat by Megabass. It's a 7-foot rod, but this rod can literally handle so many different styles of baits, from standard conventional style baits all the way up to, I know Ben throws the 8-inch Magdraft even on this rod, so it'll definitely handle the Gan Craft. It's only 2 ounces, it's super lightweight, but what's cool is like this rod has just like the other Megabass rods, they got that initial soft tip, but then they have such good backbone to actually drive the hook home on these fish. So this is going to be a solid rod for it. So another option would be actually this EverGreen combat stick. It's a 7/8. It's labeled as an extra heavy, but it's rated up to 5 ounces. It's pretty much got that same exact light tip. It's going to be a cheaper option if you guys don't want to drop $500 on a rod. It's half the price, and it's another amazing stick to try out for the Gan Craft as well. So it's a sweet little stick. The reel that I fish the Gan Craft on is a bit of a stretch. You don't really need it, but it's the Shimano, the Antares Monster Drive. It's awesome reel, absolutely love it. I know Ben sometimes carries them here, but it's definitely not super necessary to fish a bait like that. You can get away with just like a Tatula or a Mago that they have actually here, a Ryoga. Any like 200 size reel is gonna throw the bait just fine. It's gonna be great. And then the line that I've been fishing with that Gan Craft, you can fish 16 to 20 pound. I like the 20 pound fluorocarbon FC Sniper. 20 pound for me is pretty much all around for my baits, anywhere from 2 ounces all the way up to 9 ounces. I fish 20 pound, so works just fine. I don't see any problem. If you do maybe want like a wider glide on the bait, you'd probably want to downsize to 16 pounds, something a little lighter. But the bait, since it's 2 ounces, you can still get away with 20 pound fluorocarbon. So that is the Gan Craft 178. So these are some of the most underrated swim baits I think that we have in shop. I know there's probably quite a few other ones that I haven't even gotten around to that are even more underrated, but these are the ones that I've had good luck on, and I think you guys should check them out. Everything you guys saw today will be linked down in the description below. I highly recommend trying some of these baits out. Swim bait season is just right around the corner. I'm going to be posting up some more swim bait content as the swim bait season slowly approaches, so hopefully you guys stay tuned for that. Remember, subscribe to the channel. You can follow me at Jeffrey the King on Instagram. Ben, what's your stupid Instagram name?
You know what it is. It's Tackle Otaku, baby.
You can follow Ben, the owner of the Hookup Tackle, at Tackle Otaku. He doesn't really post much on there except for a bunch of WAP parodies. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.